Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Court-Martail Podcast. Introducing your host for this evening first. He is the host with the most from the West Coast, the Bay Area Brawler, Skylar Greenberg. And his partner, he has colonized, energized, and revolutionized the podcasting wrestling world today. Your Colonial champion, Sean McCarty. And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, once again to the Court-Martail Podcast. I hope your holiday hangover is as heapingly heavy as it possibly can. You just went too hard on the rum and eggnogs, and now you're waking up this morning, and you're going, oh, what a time to be alive, and I wish I maybe wasn't. But then you hear the soft angelic sounds of your friends here at the Court-Martail Podcast, and you know that everything's going to be okay. But you don't need to wait for the holidays to hear us. We're here all year round. I am your Colonial champion, Sean McCarty, bringing you today an episode that we have been putting off for the better part of a year, and then we were going to do it a month ago, and now it's actually happening. So I am thankful that it has been long delayed, but not forgotten, because here we are doing it in real time, and joining me, as always, the man of the hour, the man of the power, too sweet to be sour. He is the Bay Area Brawler himself, who is hungover himself on the greatest Chinese food that the Bay Area has to offer. The Bay Area Brawler, Skylar Greenberg. How you doing, bud?
What a rush.
That's you vomiting Chinese on the floor.
To be clear, that's not the Chinese, that's the eggnog.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that too. Or even worse, Chinese and eggnog. And, boy.
What a lethal combination.
Yeah, sweet and sour and eggy, and yeah, that's just, you're going to have a bad time. But in any case, Sky, the holiday season is pretty much coming and going. We only have this episode and the Grapplies, which are live streaming on New Year's Eve. So we might as well close out the year of regular episodes with a classic version of an episode.
Yep, and that classic version of an episode will begin with the news of the week.
Roll it! Coming straight to you from the Golden Gate Garage, this is the WrestleNews with Skylar Greenberg.
That's right, folks. It's the news of the week with the Bay Area Brawler, Skylar Greenberg at your service. And last time we did a news of the week, we kind of rushed it because we were kind of like focusing on NWL versus ACPW, which has gotten great reviews as always.
Yes, and thank you to everyone who has reached out with their support and patting us on the back and further doing to us what Tony Khan does to the Bucks and Omega on a weekly basis, or reverse that. But you know what I'm talking about.
But anyways, let's go ahead and go over the news of the week of the major things that have happened in wrestling that we kind of forgot. Let's start with the big one that is a tease of a tease of a tease and, well, a show and tell.
Yeah?
We did not cover Mandy Rose being fired from WWE. So basically what happened is that Mandy Rose has been on this like 400 or 34-day long title reign as the NXT Women's Champion back in when they rebranded it as NXT 2.0 and then decided, retcon that, go back to regular NXT.
Right.
So anyways, Mandy Rose is champion for a long-ass time. She is in a feud with one of the prospects that has a pretty bright future in Roxanne Perez. Perez winning the Iron Woman Challenge Series. And Mandy Rose attacks her, and Roxanne Perez, who said, you know what, I'm not waiting until next year for my title shot. I want it tonight. So they give her the title shot, she wins the title, and then Mandy Rose gets released the day after.
Well, why did she get released, Skylar?
Well, the reason that Mandy Rose was released was supposedly in violation of WWE's content creation. So, do you know what fan time is?
It's basically discount only fans.
Basically. But Mandy Rose had been using fan time for a while now. But the problem is that she started releasing content along with her boyfriend, former WWE wrestler Tito Santana. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, could you imagine? Actually, I could kind of imagine that. Good for Tito.
It's Tino Sabatelli.
Yeah.
But basically, for those who don't know, and he used to be in NXT a long time ago. Anyways, the point is that Mandy Rose and Tino were starting to release very, very sexually explicit pictures and videos on fan time, and WWE felt that this type of behavior was not allowed, and basically they fired her without giving her a chance to really take it off, with the reasoning that she knew what she was doing when she released that content.
Oh, she had already taken it off. It seems to me, Skylar, that was the part of the problem. But okay, so here's the thing, right? There's multiple parts to this that are all very interesting pieces of the puzzle that I'd like to break down, one by one. The first being, Mandy Rose didn't really seem that upset about this because she's like, I made $500,000 on fan time just since I've been fired, so I ain't too worried about it. So the fact that she's feeling like she's making equivalent money or better money than she is in WWE, says a lot, especially with how much time she spent in developmental. But there's a shelf life to that. Just like a wrestling career, there is a shelf life to that. And do you think, honestly, Sky, that Mandy Rose would be making $500,000 on fan time had thirsty incel wrestling fans not gotten the exposure to her via television in the first place?
No, it was very clearly done. I mean, she would have gotten there. She would have gotten to some level of it because Mandy Rose is a fine woman.
She's pretty.
She wouldn't have gotten there without the WWE fame. So in many ways, she used her WWE fame in order to get where she is.
Right. And then from there, I don't know. But here's the thing about this, too. A lot of people are saying it's not necessarily the lewd content so much as it is the third-party deal. Which was a couple years ago. What was that, 2020, when they basically just cut the nuts off of all the wrestlers doing third-party streams and deals?
Yep, it was in 2020 when COVID-19 became a thing and people had to find a way to make some extra money.
Yep, and a lot of people were up in arms saying that WWE were doing it because of that rather than the actual, not safe for work content. But at the same time, have you seen what what was leaked purportedly, Sky?
No, I have not. And listen,
just to me, it doesn't seem like a whole lot. It didn't seem like a whole lot. It's like it's titties in a pool. It's like it wasn't even that bad. Although there is someone that are alleged that are basically him having her pinned up in the shower and stuff like that. But that's not confirmed to be them. But at the same time, it's like I understand why WWE in the state that they're in now would have reservations about this. But I'm not positive. With the track history and the track record and who knows who's doing what of this kind of thing anyway, I'm not sure that the lewd part of that is really the reason why this happened.
It's difficult to tell because, again, we aren't WWE. We don't know what they do and how they operate. I think that's fair, right?
Well, I mean, we don't know everything about the ins and outs. God, if we did, we wouldn't be doing this podcast. We'd
actually be booking NWO and ACPW.
Yeah, we'd have successful companies that making millions of dollars. But
I think there is something to be said about what WWE tries to pride itself as right now, and that it's, again, first off, the toy companies are going to be, especially Mattel, is going to be mad because of sexually lewd content, but it's WWE trying to censor itself. And let's be honest, okay, it's the internet. Lots of people have easy access to be able to find this content. It's not that hard.
Well, and personally, and again, this is just my opinion, right? I don't know nothing. I'm a big goof, but with all of the stuff that you can access for far cheaper, for free, and all of the stuff that is just foisted onto people via the internet, like, was this really the worst thing in the world? Was the content the worst thing in the world, or was the amount of money she was making off it the worst thing in the world?
I don't think WWE would care about the money, because at the end of the day, it's what Mandy Rose is making. And I don't think there's like any jealousy towards that.
I don't know. I think this whole thing is very strange. I feel like there's more to this story than we've been let on. I think you're onto something with the Mattel deal. I think that there are certain guidelines regarding that they have to do. And also, you know, Triple H has been known, especially when they did the whole I forgot what the topic was that he was talking about on Austin's podcast. It might have been it was China, actually. It was China. It was like, and basically the whole idea of what precedent does it set if we don't fire her. You know what I mean? And that I can understand WWE's side of this as well. I can understand both sides of this, really. It's just the situation where I think Mandy Rose almost anticipated this was going to happen at some point and started caring less and less about it. And it also begs the question, what are people getting paid in NXT?
Well, we all know that NXT wrestlers are not being paid nearly the amount of money that the main roster does. It's a cost-cutting measure to keep cheaper contracts on NXT because it's not main roster.
Right, but then you think about Mandy Rose, who was on the main roster for like 6-7 years prior to going down there for a year and change as champion. And then what does that mean for the individual wrestlers? I mean, it's just something where I don't know what kind of contract she was getting, where she either felt the need to supplement, or the flip side of that, or where she just started feeling like she needed to put the eggs in the other basket and maybe transition her way out of wrestling to do this. I don't know. It's a very strange situation for all involved.
Well, we also have to remember, when it comes down to it, is that Mandy Rose, at this point, decided to take advantage of her name, her recognizability, and her assets to make a little bit extra money. This is a conscious decision. And that's kind of what makes it different from before, when female pictures were leaked out. Like when Paige had her pictures and videos leaked out. She was still kept on by WWE, and they condemned what happened.
Well, yeah, because that wasn't something she did. I mean, and understandably so. Yeah, like I said, I understand WWE's side of this too, because Mandy was deliberately posting it for people. You know?
Well, let me go ahead and bring something up that may offer more insight into what WWE is doing. Do you know who Chelsea Green is?
Yes.
Right. For those of you who don't know, she's a former wrestler that was in WWE. I don't know much about her. Like, I've seen her a couple times. I think she's been okay.
Okay at best. I never really saw what all the buzz was about.
I think she's a competent champion or wrestler, whatever you want to call it. But the point is that rumors are that she's being signed by WWE. She had an OnlyFans account, and she took it down because the anticipation that she's going to end up being on the main roster.
That early?
Yep.
Well, she would fit in with all of the other ho-hum women that they have on that main roster. But I don't know if she's going to really be moving needles in WWE anytime soon.
Well, there's two things for this. The first and obvious one is that the WWE Women's Division needs depth. And it needs competent, like, mid-card to lower mid-card women who can go out there and make the other girls look good. And Chelsea can do that.
Yes.
But secondly, she's taking down her own content creation, OnlyFans, in expectation of joining the roster on WWE main roster. From my understanding, Mandy Rose was able to get away with what she did for a while now because she was in NXT, and there's not as many eyes on NXT as there is the main roster women.
Right. Well, you say that now, but after this whole fiasco, that might soon change.
That might soon change. But the whole thing is that WWE knows that it is going to generate money for its people on the offside. They don't care about that. They care about protecting their deals with their companies like Mattel and the other toy companies that like the PG product. And basically, I don't know how to explain it.
Well, and you also got to remember we're now getting close to WWE renegotiating television deals. And that's going to be something that they're going to have to keep in mind. What's their look and presentation been like in the past several years, and when something like this happens, is it going to be something that Fox won't give a shit? Fox is going to be like, well, post the videos then. But NBC Universal might not, so they know they're going to have to at least stay as squeaky clean as possible, especially with the uncertainty, even still, of the whole Vince McMahon not being there stability. I mean, him being there would definitely be more of a problem, but, it's still... There's still a lot up in the air when it comes to the Triple H administration. And I think that, by and large, it's only been 6 months, 5 months since Triple H took over proper. So, I don't know. This is just one of those deals where I think that it's going to be different for everyone, but they're going to do their best to make it so that they can find some level of uniformity with it. And honestly, having Chelsea Green take down her OnlyFans is a good way of just reestablishing this is what we are, and this is the identity that we're still going to end up having.
I think at the end of the day, what it is that this sets the precedent of what WWE expects from its women in particular, and what they want and what they don't want.
Yeah, and you almost just have to wonder how many wrestler dick pics are out there that they've swept under the rug. Mandy Rose gets attention, but guys just flaunting their dick out for no reason. I remember when Seth had a dick pic and they're like, hey, I don't know, take a week off?
Well, again, that one was a situation where Seth Rollins' dick pic got revealed without his consent.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, but again, it was his ex-girlfriend, his ex-Nazi girlfriend. God damn it, Seth Rollins.
Yeah, Seth, what a human being you are.
I'll say this, Becky Lynch is a much better choice.
Becky Lynch is a much better choice. But
again, there's a whole thing between releasing of your own free will and selling your own free will image versus stuff that is supposed to be private but just gets taken.
Yeah.
Now the reason also why I mentioned Chelsea Green is that you know who her boyfriend is, right?
Is that Cardona? Oh yeah, there's word about Ryder coming back, right? That's
Matt Cardona is rumored to be coming back to WWE.
Yes, I heard that story the other day. Actually, I think it was from Cardona's Twitter that he was gonna try to make a comeback. But I'll tell you what, I do think that there is something to be gained from him, but I think at this point, what he needed to do was leave and come back, and perhaps he's going to come back as, I don't want to say necessarily something different, but maybe something a little more free for him to pursue, because I think the fans want to cheer for him still, but it's going to take a lot to kind of wipe away the Vince McMahon stank on him.
But, I mean, if anybody could, it would be Triple H. Because, again, Matt Cardona is kind of like, just like Cody Rhodes, the whole thing of, I need to get away from WWE and reinvent myself and do that on the indies before I attempt to come back and do anything.
Yeah, except Cardona wasn't smart enough to ally himself with absolute goofballs who happened to fall in love with a billionaire. But
well, actually, if you remember, Matt Cardona did show up in the early days of AEW.
He did.
And then he said, you know what? I'm not feeling the vibe.
Yeah, let me go back to Billy Corgan, who's going to make me NWA champion. Or, I'm sorry, I think he was just the national champion. I don't think he was the world champion. No, he was. He was the world champion. That's right, yes. So
I think that more speaks to AEW and the fact that then Matt Cardona said, I'm not feeling it here.
Yeah. I think especially he saw that he was professionally trained and he knew how to work, and he was seeing the people who were getting more attention and their attitude towards what they were trying to accomplish, and knew that he was not going to be breaking through on AEW television. You know, he was going to end up getting more of the same or worse, which is come in, have a competitive match, you lose, stay around for 2 weeks, end up on Dark Elevation, never to be seen again.
Or he would just be like the perennial jobber like Ethan Page. Show up, win a couple times, and then lose and lose and job and lose and job and lose and job.
Remember when people were saying that Ethan Page had like a future and like he had so much potential? Somebody explain to me this whole karate man take the heart out of the chest happy horseshit guy. Tell me what you saw in him.
What we saw was that he was kind of good in Impact, but I think that speaks more to how bad Impact was.
I think the best, most redeeming quality of Impact is letting people who can talk. I think that was a big part of what made me really like and appreciate Eli Drake, for example. Because Eli Drake was great in Impact speaking, and then he went to NWA and he spoke great, and now look at what he's doing with Wyatt. Because he can talk. You know, they do that with people on Impact, and they let them kind of get their promo flavor. And that is something that I do think that Impact does do well, is letting people just be themselves on the microphone. And they even let Cody do it for the 2 weeks he was there.
But they still let him do it.
Yeah, but they still let him do it. And then they let Brandy have the microphone, and that was something else altogether.
And they were like, you know what? We don't need to have everybody do that.
But the fact of the matter is, and I believe Cardona actually was working with Impact for a while as well, with Brian Myers, or the Hawkins as he used to be. And
right, he was also trying to reinvent himself. There's a lot of people who left WWE trying to reinvent themselves and have a career as more than what they were in WWE.
Yeah, it's just a shame that the only options are go be signed to a major contract and then never work ever in AEW, or go to WWE, which, yes, will probably take better care of you than we did before, but I mean, there's only a finite number of spots on the roster, as you and I have both discovered, Sky.
Right. Or you go to Impact, where if something happens in Impact, does anybody ever see it?
Who gives, like, the Impact is the epitome of who gives a shit. And then there's the NWA, which shat on its own, like, the only guy who was making any sort of waves for it in Nick Aldis, and then, you know, Dave Lagana, prior to him getting ousted for his own shenanigans, ruining half of the audience that they were getting when they launched a TV show because of the chicken joke Corny made.
Or putting the world title on literally the worst wrestler they possibly could.
And this is why Sasha Banks wants to go to New Japan. Because what are the other options?
New Japan, if you become big in New Japan, that's great and all, and they're big in Japan, but it's not crossover appeal to America, except for the very finite amount of American wrestling fans that happen to stay up late to watch New Japan.
Yeah, or, you know, during the one pay-per-view a year of Forbidden Door, where the matches will be booked and nothing makes sense. And somehow...
Again, all this to say is that what happens from here with Matt Cardona will be interesting to watch. I am hopeful for the former Zack Ryder that
Me too.
He does come back to WWE. He gets treated better than his first run.
I hope he gets to do something. I want to do something. But I do want to kind of go back really quick to Sasha Banks in New Japan, because that was something that came out recently, that she was going to be there, and presumably she's going to be, from what I hear, potentially wrestling Kairi Sane, or for the wrestler formerly known as Kairi Sane, to launch New Japan's women's division. And I find this fascinating, but I think it's actually a surprisingly good fit for Sasha Banks. And I just want your thoughts on the fact that we now know for a fact that she is not coming back, and that she has found ventures elsewhere to wrestle.
Unless this is all a big smokescreen and Sasha Banks will actually go back to WWE.
Or she shows up for Wrestle Kingdom and then comes back at the Rumble. But
remember back, like, what was it? Was it last year when Bryan Danielson left WWE?
Yeah. 2021, yes. Yeah, it was last
right. It
year.
was 2021. And the rumor that WWE was willing to allow Bryan Danielson to wrestle in Japan if he wanted to.
Right.
And then there's the whole thing with Shinsuke Nakamura wrestling in Japan while still under contract to WWE against, I don't remember who it was. But it was a Japanese legend, the Great Muta.
Yes. Occasionally they will do that. I don't know if that's the case though. With this scenario, and I'll tell you why. I think that at this point, Sasha Banks definitely has an overinflated sense of self, so I'm guessing that she wanted Punk money that she did not necessarily deserve. But at the same time, where would she have fit on this WWE roster? Where would she fit on that roster right now? And don't get me wrong, that women's roster is desperate for more names, and Sasha Banks would be a Band-Aid, but that's about as much as you could get out of her. I mean, I think as the fourth of the horsewomen, as you and I have both discussed at length, I think what Sasha Banks needs right now is to go make something out of herself somewhere else. You know, Vince would say at the town of the time, go get famous somewhere else and come back. And he always treated people better when he did that. And when they did that. And I think that's going to be the case for Sasha. I think this is healthy for both WWE and Sasha to get that kind of facelift like we were talking about with Cody. I think this is a perfect opportunity for Sasha to do that herself and prove to WWE that she's worth the money that she says she is.
True. Again, it's interesting to watch because right now, with the way things are going, I feel like WWE could use Sasha Banks, but Sasha Banks doesn't need WWE. And
right now, no. And
that's what it is right now, is that right now, the way things are, I think Sasha Banks, well, here's the thing. She goes to New Japan, right? And she's wrestling with the IWGP Women's Championship against Kairi.
Yes.
The potential for how good the women's division in New Japan will be is going to depend on its roster and what talents they're able to get.
Correct.
I think Sasha Banks I think Sasha Banks in Japan, you're right. The way that she wrestles especially would work in New Japan.
Yes, yeah, especially if she can overcome one of the things that we have criticized her for severely in WWE, which is where none of her shit looks like it hits or hurts. What's the perfect place to fix that problem? Japan. And truthfully, they need somebody of American stature and name to, I think, to kind of either to bring some level of additional eyes onto the product. New Japan has always known that the American market is somewhat important, no matter how small a group of people are watching it from America, that it is important for America. So hearing that Sasha Banks, who has a following, is working in Japan is definitely going to get eyeballs over there. And also another thing we didn't really talk about with this is legacy. Because in a lot of ways, Sasha Banks could etch in a legacy of New Japan's women's division by being such a trailblazer in this effort. And who knows what dividends that are going to be.
And she wouldn't necessarily be overshadowed by any of the other horsewomen, because let's be honest, Charlotte and Becky are bigger stars than her, and Bayley and Sasha are kind of on the same level, but Bayley, because she's had the better matches, will stand better in the test of time.
Yeah, and also I think Bayley has a better sense of longevity and also adding layers to her gimmick rather than adding colors of hair dye to her gimmick.
But Sean, let me ask the most important question about this.
What's that?
Sasha Banks, let's say she wins the IWGP Women's Championship.
Yeah.
How long until Charlotte Flair takes the title from her?
I can't imagine that she would. I can't imagine that she would.
Come on.
I'll tell you what.
The Japanese would love to have the daughter of Ric Flair be a champion for their company.
If WWE, if Charlotte ended up leaving WWE, then maybe. I don't see that happening.
I'm just saying, I'm just saying, nightmare scenario. Charlotte Flair wins the IWGP Women's Championship from Sasha Banks. Woo.
If she's not under contract to WWE, I'd be interested. Because that means that that's a completely different kind of match. You know, than because a lot of what my problems were with those matches was that we're watching the same formatted match every single time. That doesn't necessarily mean that what they're going to do in Japan would be the same shit that they did in WWE's same cut and paste format. You know, that's what makes, and that's also partially what intrigues me about Sasha Banks in New Japan. Are we going to see more than what WWE allowed us to see from her? Because we know how watered down a lot of these WWE wrestlers are because of what WWE says yay or nay to. Is that going to change now that Sasha Banks or Mercedes, well, I forget her last name.
We'll just say Mercedes.
Yeah, but you know, she's going to find success, I think, in doing this. And I really am hopeful for her. I really am. I think that this is going to be healthy for both parties, and she's going to mean more when she goes back to WWE. There's no way she doesn't eventually, but if she takes 2 or 3 years to cement a legacy in Japan, I think that that's also worth doing as well.
Not to mention, right now she's only 30. She has time to, if she wants to, come back to WWE.
Yeah. The world is Mercedes' oyster right now.
But the question, and we'll transition this to one of the last topics of the news of the week, is what happens if Mercedes or Sasha Banks goes to AEW?
Well, the thing is, Tony will pay her the fuck you money, but do you think that she's going to get past the Kenny Omega wall? I don't. Yeah, she would add some much needed star power and name recognition and match quality, but I would more think that they should go get Mandy Rose more than they get Sasha Banks.
I feel like Sasha Banks would fit in perfectly on AEW's roster. Now, backstage politics are backstage politics, and we don't know what happens backstage with Sasha Banks and what her relationships are to any of the people back there.
Yeah, but if you think that her self-worth is high enough where she's telling Vince McMahon, hey, go fuck yourself, and walks away, you think that she's going to get along with I can't make decisions for myself con? She's going to get frustrated instantly. There's a chance she comes in, cuts one promo, works one match, and leaves never to be seen again. Not because Tony Khan doesn't want to use her, but because Sasha Banks is like, fuck you, this isn't worth it.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
You know, I think that at this point, Sasha has got something in Japan. They're willing to pay her top dollar to be what she is and what she's going to be. I see no reason to even bother with AEW unless you're doing, weirdly enough, you know, the person who would sell a Forbidden Door pay-per-view is Sasha Banks headlining it.
And that's maybe what ends up happening is that, let's say Sasha Banks gets the IWGP Women's Championship and she wrestles against the women's champion of AEW at Forbidden Door.
Or any of the women who actually can work, like Jamie Hayter or Dr. Britt, or, you know, a couple of these ladies who... Serena Deeb, for Christ's sakes.
Hot take. Dr. Britt Baker is overrated as fuck.
I mean, she got over with her words, not from her wrestling.
Dr. Britt Baker is a dentist version of Alexa Bliss.
Well, I like Alexa Bliss better than Dr. Britt. I mean, if she didn't have that... well, actually, you talk about the tooth and nail match and then all of Alexa's cinematic horse shit. Well,
that comparison is getting a little bit better, isn't it?
It is. The more that I'm talking myself through it, the more I'm like, well, you may have a point.
But anyways, back to the whole thing is that I think Sasha Banks against someone like Jamie Hayter, that would be a fun match. Just one thing with Sasha Banks, AEW, please. Do not let her be anywhere near Paige.
I was just about to say, that's the match. That's the match that sells Forbidden Door right there. Oh my God. You know how many tickets that would sell, Sky? The amount that is a money drawing pay-per-view right there. Tony Khan, you can have that one.
Take it. Now, let's get to the last piece of news. This thing happened 3 weeks ago, but we haven't mentioned it because we're waiting for some good news, and we do have some good news. So, the man who we're going to talk about in a little bit, Barry Windham, was traveling in the Atlanta airport, and he suffered a cardiac event, or basically a heart attack.
Yep.
And he was near to death. Thankfully, because of a couple of people who were in the airport who were giving CPR until medics arrived, they were able to get him to Orlando, Florida, to the ICU to be treated. We just found out a couple weeks ago that he has left the ICU, and he's in good condition for the most part. He's still taking medications, and it's still touch and go, but Barry Windham is okay.
Well, that's good to hear. And from what I was hearing with listening to Corny's podcast, this is not the first heart attack he's had. This is, I believe, the second or third that he's had in years past. So it's I'm really glad that Barry is able to kind of bounce back from that. It's some people don't even get one. So I'm good for I'm happy to hear it for Barry and for Bray and for all, having to deal with holiday tragedy is not fun. Take it from me, think about where I was last year versus now. So I'm glad that Barry was able to recover, at least to the level he is, and we hope that the recovery continues to be speedy and effective.
For some reason, Ric Flair and Barry Windham were able to kick out at 2.
Yeah, and somehow Ric Flair's, that was actually ridiculous how close he really got, which makes it ridiculous that he wants to keep wrestling.
I mean, if anybody could do it, it's the nature Ric Flair.
But come on, Rick. Come on. But in any case, the thing is, if Ric Flair hadn't sold being the main eventer of many, many shows, that some of which were the Thanksgiving event like Starrcade and sometimes Christmas Day shows that were huge sellers. But our topic today, Sky, is holiday shows. Do they land now? Would they land now? As far as being some of the highest rated or the top drawing wrestling shows of the calendar year. Now, in the past, people would have the TV on as they're cooking the Christmas goose or whatever the hell they're doing, and they would turn on and watch wrestling. It was one of the top drawing days back in the Crockett and Territory eras. Especially, Crockett used it a lot. The idea would be that you'd get, several days off, probably like 5 or 6 days off the week beforehand, and then you'd come work Christmas and, Christmas to New Year's or whatever the case is. And you'd work Christmas Day, but you kind of get your Christmas with your family beforehand anyway. And it was a big draw because it was on in the house, and at that time, wrestling was almost as synonymous as football in the 80s and 70s, and definitely more so in the 60s. But nowadays, with the state that wrestling's in, I doubt that we would get those same kind of returns.
I think it depends. So let's go back for a second. The whole idea of the holiday show is that the family gets together, the family's spending time together, and you want to know what? We got tickets for the wrestling show? Let's go to the wrestling show. And that's what drew people to shows and why wrestling promoters were able to make such good money on the holidays. I mean, the Great American Bash, always a 4th of July tradition for WCW, right?
Yep.
Halloween Havoc, another one. Halloween time, let's all get together. It's spooky season. Survivor Series and Starrcade happening during Thanksgiving. Everyone's around the Thanksgiving table and watching people wrestle.
Well, it's also because Survivor Series was made directly to spite Starrcade. and bully the pay-per-views into making sure that they ran WrestleMania and Survivor Series instead. But that's a story for another time.
Right. But the whole thing with the wrestling shows in the holidays is that the families would get together, and because wrestling was a family sport and entertainment at the time, you could get the whole family together and say, hey, let's go to the wrestling show and see these big stars. Hey, I want to go and watch Ric Flair wrestle against Dusty Rhodes. Or how about we go watch Andre the Giant wrestle against Hulk Hogan on the holiday show? Hey, let's go see Junkyard Dog versus somebody.
That's the legacy of the Junkyard Dog, folks.
Literally, Junkyard Dog could wrestle anybody, and he would get over because he's Junkyard Dog.
Yeah, well, especially in the early, late 70s, early 80s, Mid-South, Junkyard Dog, there was nobody as over as JYD until, the drugs.
Right. But the reason why the wrestling shows were able to be booked on holidays was because, one, wrestling was a very big thing back then and had the ability to... They had the stars to sell out shows like that.
Yeah.
The second thing is that there's other competition around. I mean, football and basketball are both on Christmas Day now. The holidays have been taken over by a lot of the other major sports that weren't as popular as they were when wrestling had its heydays in the 70s, 80s, 90s.
True. And also, and another thing is that a lot of the networks now wouldn't put wrestling over any of those things because wrestling does not draw the viewership than any of those, previous ones. And that a lot has to do with just what the state of the business is, which is why really running a holiday show nowadays, I don't think would change anything in the viewership. If anything, it would probably make it worse.
Right. I mean, people are not going to watch the holiday shows because they're too busy doing other things. It's not necessarily that it hurts to have a holiday show, but you have to consider that people who are going to watch the show, it depends on the holiday and what else is happening, because so much is going on right now. It's competition.
Well, and the other hard part, too, is like, what do you do to alleviate if you're worried about the part of, I want to spend Christmas with my family, like, what do? Tape a Christmas show and then air it that day? And, like, because everything on Christmas, as far as what people watch, if it's not a movie, is live sports. So it would have to be something live, but it would also, you'd have to have a hell of a card to get people even interested at this point. And, you mentioned something big, Sky, with star power. Who right now could draw for a holiday show that would make the needle move in any way? That they can't or don't already save for WrestleMania season, which they already need to do anyway.
Okay. Are we talking full-time wrestlers on WWE's roster?
No. Well, I mean, I would imagine you'd use full-time wrestlers on the roster, but yeah, I mean, not necessarily. You could book a Brock Lesnar match for a holiday special, give him a holiday paycheck.
Well, here's the thing. You know how John Cena was booked for that December 30th show against Roman Reigns, Sami Zayn, and Kevin Owens, right?
I do.
Did you know that within 24 hours, that arena show sold 5,000 tickets?
I bet.
So there's your answer, John Cena.
Yeah, I mean, and, that's the idea here is that you probably could do wrestling, do a wrestling holiday show, but you'd probably have to do it in a bit of a vacuum. Like, you couldn't expect people to you'd want people to hop on the train and want to keep watching, but you couldn't necessarily do stuff that is following or going through your current storylines. It would need to be almost like a single event. We've booked this single event for the show itself. Run it as a standalone rather than another episode of Raw, basically.
Basically what Tribute to the Troops is, in almost a way.
Yeah, and do something where it's more like, okay, this is still, or, I hate to say the Saudi shows, but kind of like the Saudi shows, like, hey, this is still kind of canon, and this is still kind of what we normally do on a regular basis, but we've kind of juiced it up a little bit with some bigger name talent, and some bigger payoffs for them because they're working the holidays, but we don't have to lose that money by having it be a holiday, holiday special that nobody draws, or it doesn't have to be out in Saudi Arabia. It could be right here in the US of A.
That's why recently WWE has done their holiday shows, if they have them, in big cities like Chicago and New York, because they know they can relatively get people to go to them.
Or, you know, you could do maybe if you want to do a special show like that, maybe that's where you have like a European Peacock show. You know, have a show in an arena. It doesn't even need to be a monstrous arena, but have it be a 10,000 seater, somewhere in Germany, and then just have Europeans flood that place. I'm sure they would for the Christmas season. I think that there is a way that it can draw, but I don't think you can pitch it as standard canon for our show that we're running on a weekly basis and have it draw, because nobody's going to be interested in that. Not as something that is supposed to be special day, special kind of show.
Right. There's only so many stars that WWE has in their group that they can use to build for those types of shows. The John Cena one you can argue because that's basically New Year's Day / New Year's Eve.
Right.
But the problem with that is that that's a one-time thing with John Cena.
What that we know of. and
you implying something, sir?
I can't see anything. I don't know. I don't know nothing. But the other part of this too is that, like, it's not even just exclusive to WWE. We're just using it in their context. But, like, who would AEW use to build up a holiday show? And how long would it be? And how many times would just Chris Jericho win?
CM Punk versus Chris Jericho.
Chris Jericho would probably be the most accurate wrestler's depiction of Santa Claus. Because he's fat.
And his hair is turning white.
And he's
got a big old belly.
And he's becoming like Hulk Hogan as far as the lie ratio coming out of his gums. But if you don't believe me, just ask the aliens that abducted him. Yeah, goddamn.
But real quickly, I just want to ask you a question before we move on to our match of the week.
Yes.
What's your favorite memory of a holiday show that WWE or wrestling has just done in general?
Well, I'm trying to think of like what's... Because see, the interesting thing is that WWE doesn't necessarily like do anything super special for holidays. They'll do an occasional like Santa Claus thing, or like Steve Austin showing up as Santa and stunning Vince at the 2003 tribute to the troops it was.
Or the 2005 tribute in the troops when John Cena was Santa Claus and AA Vince.
Yeah, they don't do necessarily anything major like that. I do remember the absurdity, and me seeing for the first time the absurdity of the turkey suit that Impact made for their Thanksgiving time matches. And they would actually have a match, and folks, I believe this, I don't know if this is still a thing, but they reference it a lot, where there is a match and the loser has to wear a turkey suit, which I can only describe as like a half-torn tank top with a turkey neck on one of the sleeves.
There's a reason why that picture is involved in our... So you've been released by the
Yeah.
Team Song package.
Yes. It's
But do you want... Can I be dark for a second?
Well, dark, you can be Dark Elevation.
No, never Dark Elevation. Remember that episode of Raw where Alberto Del Rio ran over Santa?
Yes.
and that show-long angle of Santa Claus being injured, John Cena wrestling Alberto Del Rio. The whole thing is that Matt Striker having to say, "We have contacted representatives of the North Pole to let them know about Santa's condition," and he had to sell it with the most serious face he possibly could.
Yeah, God bless Matt Striker for trying.
Until finally Santa started to revive himself in the middle of that John Cena and Alberto Del Rio match, which was clearly Mick Foley, but that's fine.
Yes. Well, and or we could talk. I don't know why Impact is coming back to mind, but remember that fatal four-way Extreme battle royal with the barbed wire Christmas tree dangling from the center that had relic.
Oh, you made us watch that match.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
And trust me, the less I said about that match, the better.
Yeah, that was something else. But that's also part of the problem, and something I do want to touch on. If you're gonna have a show on a holiday, you can't do such gimmicky like garbage like that. You know, I think that a big part of why wrestling holiday events don't draw is that they do some dumb holiday shenanigans that are just silly, and not in a good way silly, just stupid silly, and it kind of ruins the feeling of it. I mean, back in the day, I really enjoyed the 2003 episode of Raw where all of the women dressed up in Santa costumes, and I believe it was a pillow fight that they had. That Stacy Keibler won with a gigantic, powerful, painful kick to the head. It was like, which was the funniest part. It was all silly and they're all just playing around. And then all of a sudden, Stacy Keibler just hoofs somebody. I was like, oh, and then covers him. It was so that was something. But again, that's. All of these holiday shows do that, and if they didn't do that and actually presented a serious show, I feel like they would be in a better position to draw money on holidays than they currently are.
Because here's the thing. We just did our shows, our ACPW and NWL shows. And did you notice during the whole time we didn't do a Miracle on 34th Street fight?
Yeah.
We didn't have people do, like in November, we didn't have people throw them into a turkey, and we didn't have people put a turkey on their head and then throw them into the ring post like they do with the Halloween jack-o'-lantern sometimes. We didn't do comedy stuff. What we did is we promoted the shows. Probably because you're in Madison Square Garden, you had like some Christmas things around, and you probably decorated the ring with like some Christmas things, but you didn't have that be like the props decorated with Christmas shit. And we did like holiday-themed giveaways and holiday-themed charity events. That's how you do the holidays, is you incorporate it around the show. You don't make it part of the show.
Yeah, there's one thing between making the show holiday themed and then theming your show around the holidays. And that's, I think, what the bigger problem is, and that's what they've done. And, you know, I'm glad you brought up the Miracle on 34th Street fight, because every time I see that, I'm like, that is the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my life. It's like, first of all, you're lucky that doesn't get you sued every time you say it, because that movie, unless NBC or Fox owns it, which they probably do, is a slippery slope. And second of all, none of your street fights are street fights, so why would this one be any different, just named after a movie?
Well, by the way, to answer your question, it was owned by 20th Century Studios, but unfortunately they were sold to Disney, so it's a Disney subsidiary.
Okay. Well, there. So unless you're planning to sell the company to Disney, watch yourself. Well, Fox and Disney are bedfellows now, so I guess that counts.
Sean, go to your direct messages and see a couple pictures of the back of Ricochet's head after the 34th Miracle Street fight.
I was wondering whose head that was when you sent that to me. Yeah, it got stitched up. That's a pretty big knot.
6 staples to the back of Ricochet's head after he got hit in the head by, I think it was Ludwig Kaiser with a prop or something. Again, the stuff doesn't need to be that dangerous.
No. And a lot of it is wholly unnecessary, and it's not going to matter tomorrow what you did on that street fight. You know, it's just, I would rather.
I mean, again, the crown of thorns.
Yeah, which, stay tuned. That's going to be a moment that we talk about in our on the Grapplies next week. And oh my God, this guy. You know, it's weird. Ladies and gentlemen, you have to understand, Skylar and I are both football fans, and we always end up recording these shows on Sundays. It's actually Christmas Day at the time you're recording. Sky, you want to know what the final score of that Rams-Denver game was?
No, I know the final score. In fact, there was a pick six thrown by the backup quarterback of the Denver Broncos to Jalen Ramsey.
God damn. 51-14.
I was going to interrupt you during the Mandy Rose segment, but I figured we might as well just keep going.
Well, that's so folks, anyone who's out there, you hate to see it. But in any case,
no, fuck the Rams.
Well, no, I'm not talking about the Rams. I mean, you hate to see it if you're the Denver Broncos, because you are just
fuck the Broncos.
Y'all just suck ass. And it's really
okay, you want to know the reason why I hate the Rams?
Because they're in your division?
Yes, because I'm a 49er fan. Do you want to know the reason why I hate the Broncos?
Because they're giving the Seahawks better draft picks and the Seahawks are in your division?
And fuck Russell Wilson.
Who also was in your division.
Yes, so fuck the both of them.
So all rational responses, both of those teams are a big old bag of booty holes. But what aren't big old bags of booty holes are two good men wrestling a good match with a crappy finish in an era that would destroy WCW as we know it. That can only mean one thing, folks. It's time for the match of the week. Roll it.
What time is it?
It's the fight, it's the brawl, it's the match of the week. It's tonight, watch along with the son of a beat. It's one fall, the down for the 1, 2, and 3. So don't stall, hang on to the edge of your seat. We got a punch and a flip and a powerbomb too. All the moves and the stars are all under review. See the baby face cheered and the heels get heat. This is wrestling at its peak. It's the match of the week.
That's right, folks. It is our match of the week, and today I have chosen a match because we were trying to discuss Barry Windham for the better part of a year, and now we're doing it. And this is the match we chose. We were gonna watch a Ric Flair Barry Windham match, but both Skylar and I were like, yeah, but it's a Ric Flair match. We know how it's gonna go. Like, I want to see what Barry's got. So we chose Barry Windham and Arn Anderson from November 2nd, 1991. Sky, what did you think about this match?
This was a interesting match, to say the least. I thought this match was good. Again, it just shows how good Arn Anderson is. Like, really, he's the best.
Arn has a very interesting selling style. It almost, every time he sells and he ends up like flat in his butt, he always reminds me of like a confused toddler who's like pouty and getting like upset that he's coming to realize that he's not getting his way. And I don't mean that as a knock at all. It's just a very unique sell. And every time I see Arn, it makes me laugh. And you know who does that a lot nowadays?
Who?
Dax Harwood. I see that sell from Dax and Cash a lot when the 2 times a week, 2 times a year we see them wrestle.
Yeah.
But that's something that they do a lot. Arn has got a very interesting sell style, and I think that during the first half of this match, when Barry was just all over him with the leg, that was very well exemplified. One of my favorite parts of this match was the fact that both men had a body part they could target. Too often, Arn with the leg and then Barry with the shoulder after Arn shoved him into the ring post, you know, starting the heat. And what's one of the things that happens too often is that the heel takes advantage of a babyface body part, and then that's the only story of the matchup, is that one babyface is one body part. Seeing both men have something that's an open target for both of them to capitalize on, like equals, is something that is lost in modern wrestling.
Right, because there's only the heel that can hurt the babyface. The babyface can't hurt the heel.
Well, as far as doing some sort of injury angle, you know, as far as something, you know, some sort of plot device to further the match, you know.
Now, yeah, that's true. Now, hold on. Let's go back to the beginning of this match. Ladies and gentlemen, this is how you do a hot start.
Yes. This is how you get into a fight with punches to start a match without it feeling disgraceful.
Not only that, but they did the collar and elbow tie up afterwards. But they started hot because these two have been friends. They've been fighting with each other for a long time, and Jim Ross, again, he's the best.
Jim Ross is the best, but I have a critique of Jim, and I like Jim a lot. You know, he was by himself here, and I know how difficult it is to do commentary by yourself. And Jim has always been very adept at it. But I felt like there were some times when Jim Ross was really trying harder than he needed to. And there were some moments where he probably could have just left it exposed and let the match sell the moment. But we're also talking, it was still relatively early in Jim Ross's career, about 10 years, you know, so it was something, it didn't bother me. It was just something that I noted that sometimes some of those moments could have laid out instead.
That's true. But again, it's hard.
But I love JR. That's like such a nitpick. Like,
yeah, it's such a nitpick. But here's the thing, though, is that this match, what was really good about it, it was not just that these two guys know how to work with each other, because again, they've been friends and working with each other for so long. It was that everything was a struggle. Everything was a fight to get an advantage. And it felt like the tide could be turned at any point, because again, both guys were selling the injury.
And it was very clunky, but in a good way. You know, sort of a meat and potatoes
without being
fight.
botchy.
Yeah, you know, there's a difference, folks. Because clunky, you can have a match be clunky where everything looks a little gruffer, you know, maybe some guy slips out of your hands when you're trying to get him up or something like that, and it's like, okay, you know, just exhaustion. But the opposite side of that, it's not like they were going for contrived spots or setting up a superplex and then one person falls and the other, or when Evil Uno did the Hurricanrana and just ran and sold into the ring post with nobody there.
or some 300-pound motherfucker trying to dive over the top rope and misses.
Fucking top dollar. Oh God. Well, you could bet
the only thing top about him is how far he falls.
Yeah. I want to make some sort of Chris Jericho joke, but you know, I already did.
Chris Jericho is so fat when he gets off the chair, that's how Top Dollar falls to the top rope.
Yeah.
Yeah, my Chris Jericho jokes aren't as good as they used to be.
That's okay. Well, because he also got into better shape physically, not necessarily mentally, so they don't necessarily as hit. Besides, you can only do nostalgia jokes, you know, so long before they start to turn into DX. So,
but DX believes they can fly like R. Kelly.
Yeah, well, they may very well, but now they're both executives, so they can no longer fly like R. Kelly. Otherwise, they'll end up making Mandy Rose-style videos, and that we cannot have anymore.
I mean, HBK was already working for Playgirl. So.
I know. Well, you know, it's funny. We didn't mention it at the time, but that's also one of the reasons why people were so upset. They're like, well, they did Playboy and Playgirl in the 90s. I'm like, yeah, well, it was the 90s. Okay? Like, it was a different time. Like, you got your historical dating is part of, like, understanding what the culture of the people were. And that was before they went public anyway.
Right. And the other thing, too, as much as I love Arn Anderson, that haircut, awful.
Yeah, I mean, if you could call it a haircut, but
I'm gonna be. Arn Anderson's head should have been censored because it looks like a butt.
Yeah, I mean, his head always kind of looks like a butt. But Barry Windham did a great job of prying his head free from that Arn Anderson leg scissors with the headstand. That was one of the few, like, I wouldn't call it a spot, but one of the few moments that I'm like, all right, that was pretty cool. And then going into the punch. And did you see how nastily and that right hand, Arn Anderson sold that right hand like his bell got rung hard.
That's the other thing too, is that both of these guys, their punches were exceptional.
And the selling of their punches was exceptional. You know, and that's really, these two are both expert sellers. On top of what they're able to do, the way that they made their hits register adds so much to this. Like, and that's one of the things, like, in some ways, I know this is going to sound very, very weird, but in some ways, you gotta sympathize for someone like Excalibur. Because in a match like this, with Arn Anderson and Barry Windham, they're giving time to sell the moment, and they're taking moments to kind of let it breathe, and Jim Ross is able to say, oh, when he did that, you know, as he was trying to catch his bearings and able to add little things. There's no time for that in modern wrestling if you're trying to call all the moves like Excalibur is. Modern wrestling matches are not commentary friendly.
Yes, but that's also on commentary to adapt to it. Like, there are ways to call modern matches and not sound like you're just going as fast or faster than the wrestlers doing the moves.
But true. I don't disagree with you on that. Again, I'm not necessarily justifying Excalibur, but I can empathize with the position because it is on the commentators to adjust that for the modern matches, but it also wouldn't necessarily hurt the commentators if the modern matches actually were able to ebb and flow and weren't 100 miles an hour all the time, so that the commentators had some space to describe and elaborate and put over what people were watching.
Well, that's the hard part too, is that just attention span thing. It's just, you have to have an attention span in order to watch wrestling matches, and I feel like the modern wrestling fan just doesn't have it like these people do. A lot of these people were sitting down and they were clapping, but they weren't like going over the top until the finish.
Well, and also that's just a kind of a depiction of A, what Jim Hurt's crowds were like, but B, at the same time, that kind of wrestling back then, while it was very hot for the major moments, remember, this was just an episode of television. You know, this was just WCW TV. This wasn't like a major show, so they was not going to have a large amount of crowds, but even those crowds, it was more of like an energy than it was like major pops and major, you know, boos. You know, you would hear the anger, you could feel the anger in the room when, you know, something like that happened with, if you were able to see Arn Anderson's healing last for more than 5 seconds, you know, we would have got more of that in this, but they were into it. That's not to say that the fans weren't interested in the match. They definitely were.
Right. It's just difficult because, again, a lot of this is just what Jim Herd damage had done to WCW already and what it was going to continue to do.
Yeah, only 6 months in.
I gotta say, though, that knee to the gut by Arn Anderson to Barry was stiff.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and that's the thing. It's like you could make your stuff look snug, you know, without really hurting them. And Arn Anderson was really good at making this stuff look nice and snug and look like it was devastating without really, you know, laying a potato in here or there. You know, it happens from time to time. But in any case,
the biggest thing with Arn Anderson, what I loved about this match, is that all match, it was very clear he was not going to beat Barry Windham one-on-one in a fair, clean fight. It was a lot of cheating, you know, raking the eyes, raking the mouth, grabbing the hair.
Yeah, and for a shine that I thought lasted a lot longer than I suspected, it was gonna, you know, from the time up until Arn Anderson actually got him his shoulder posted, it was a good like 7 or 8 minutes prior to that. Well, no, maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it was a good amount of time that Barry got in his offense before Arn was able to get the heat and then start doing the feet on the ropes and doing the arm bar with the hand on the top rope while the referee was looking down. I did like JR's commentary where he's like, I know a lot of people would blame the referee for that, but you should be blaming Arn Anderson for cheating in the first place. that tickled me.
A lot of things tickle you.
Yeah, this is, well...
Just be careful, because Josh will be tickling your butt.
I was going to say, not as many as I'd like, but some that do anyway.
But this arm submission with Arn Anderson putting the arm behind Barry Windham, again, that's just beautiful.
Yeah, I loved that
special.
where it was kind of like that double arm, and then he like wrenched him into the side, into that pinning predicament. Because again, you're trying to get him onto the ground for a pin. So it was small, it was slow, but it worked. It worked, and you know, there's the slow nuances of wrestling that you just cannot capture when you're trying to get as many moves in as humanly possible. And this is what these two are experts in.
I mean, that sleeper hold was starting to get people really excited. When Barry had Arn in the sleeper hold, people were really, like, they were starting to get up because they're like, maybe he's actually going to win it.
Yeah, notice how long it took. From the time that Barry started getting a comeback to this first finish was maybe 2 minutes, tops.
It was 3 minutes at most.
Yeah. Which is why when and you and I have said it before, a lot of the times when we were doing pay-per-view reviews, when you start making that comeback, the clock is ticking. It's not the time to start a second match with a second set of heat.
But you have to do the second heat in order to get to the time card that you have been assigned.
To get to the second less hot tag that just leads to more moves, and then like a double splash and a double super kick, and then who day and we to ones and all that.
Or the third, or if there's AEW, a third hot tag so that Kenny Omega can get his shit in after the Bucks get their shit in.
Yes, the after the 75th Canadian Destroyer, then we get in the 3 kicks and the V triggers, and yeah.
But this finish was a AEW. No, okay, sorry. It was a certain person, and we had to look this up, but this person was booking at the time. It was a Dusty finish, baby.
And I don't even blame Dusty for this one, because this obviously had to do with television time constraints, and they just didn't push this. They just did not time this well. And so the finish of this match is Arn Anderson eventually cheats, holds onto the ropes while he's got, I believe he's schoolboyed and then grabbed the ropes, or he did something similar to that. I forget what the actual move was. I thought it was really clever, but I can't remember what it was.
So Barry Windham power slams Arn. Arn basically kicks out. Then they go to the finish. Barry Windham tries to go for Arn tries to go for like a pile driver or something. Barry reverses it into a back body drop. Arn reverses it, rolls him up, grabs the ropes with his hands, and puts Barry Windham down with his feet. The referee declares Arn Anderson the winner. Right,
because he didn't see the hand on the ropes. Which finish I liked. That was good. I had nothing wrong with that. That if you had kept that and let that digest, that would have been fine with me. But we couldn't do that.
But then what happens is that the referee looks at somebody off screen, and off screen is Ron Simmons, who has come to ringside in the last 45 seconds of this to tell the referee that Arn Anderson had his arms on the ropes.
And the referee's just like, he did? Damn! Let's restart the match. And
then they restart the match. Barry does a schoolboy roll-up of Arn Anderson, celebrates with Ron Simmons and the referee going up the stage as Jim Ross says, and we'll be right back. And then they got the commercial.
Yeah, and literally, Arn Anderson did not even have the time to say, wait, what? Before he got rolled up. Like, the referee literally restarted the match away from Arn. So, like, he didn't even see any of that happening. He was like, wait, what are we doing? Roll up. It was so fast, and and the fans popped, but it was also like, I think the fans were still kind of confused. Like, yay, Barry won, but like, what? And while we're on the subject, why the hell would this referee just take Ron Simmons' word for it? As upstanding a guy as Ron Simmons is, why would you just be like, oh, okay? It's like, that's not how it works.
I mean, Ron Simmons is the truly dependable black man. How can you not trust Ron Simmons? How can you not trust Ron Simmons?
I do trust Ron Simmons, but if I'm a referee and my decision is valid, even if that's the case, I would need, in a real wrestling, real sports, I'd need a replay. I'd need footage, and we can't get that footage in 1991 until next week. So, sorry, sucks to suck, but I got to see proof. I'm not saying you're wrong, but it's still, I already counted the pin. I'm not just going to restart the match just because you said so. Like, what the hell is that? That was so annoying. And it was literally just because they ran out of time. And that's
again, this is literally the second WCW match I've watched in our match of the week where they ran out of time and had to cut the commercial really quickly.
Instantly. Yeah. You want to talk about hashtag bad formatting? And it was shit like that shot WCW in the foot more times than it doesn't. Same thing happens with actually both companies now, with the amount of times we shat on Kevin Dunn and the amount of times that we've equally shat on AEW's equivalent of Kevin Dunn.
Well, yes, but we also have to we have to blame the booker, baby.
Yeah, but it wouldn't have been a problem if they had actually. Okay, hear me out, right? Let's say they had like 2-3 more minutes for this. If they had gotten another referee out at the same time and they talked and they'd gone through and they had found a way to like get tape there so they could like review it, and there was multiple referees and the referees are coming along and they're kind of discussing it for a minute. They're both on either side of the ring. Arn Anderson celebrating, trying to leave, but like a referee's holding him, and then the referee tells, I forget the name of that in-ring announcer, that little scrawny motherfucker. I can't remember his name. And say to him, ladies and gentlemen, the referee has determined that the match will be restarted. Arn goes to the referee all upset, like, what are you fucking kidding me? Then we get this schoolboy pin. That's fine. But because it happened in 10 seconds, nobody could filter or understand or digest any of the proceeding that happened after Arn got the pin and the referee just restarted it just because Ron said so. There was a way to do this right, and I feel like if they had had the time, they could have taken the time to make it right. I don't know if it's necessarily the concept here and Dusty's fault for the concept, as much as it is the format letting the concept down.
True, and also just because we have to point this out again, if we go by your logic, right, and a second referee comes down and they reverse the decision, that sets the precedent for every other heel cheating to win a match, meaning that a referee in the back always is going to be watching and changing the decision based on something that happens.
Well, then you have to make that a part of your format in general. Or make the excuse, like I said before, of and just not do the second half of this and say, we can't make the film until next week. I need to see film as proof. And then just leave that open and ambiguous and leave the people mad.
WCW.
Yeah. What can you say? There was a way to do this. There was a way to do this. This was not the way to do this. The match itself, no knock on Arn or Barry, though. The match itself was fine.
It was, and we should go ahead and move on to the next part and talking about the man of the week, Barry Windham.
Our superstar spotlight, Barry Windham, Uncle Howdy himself. And
could you imagine if he's Uncle Howdy?
Well, the word is it's going to be Bo, but we'll see how that all transpires. But in any case, Barry Windham had a career that lasted a very long time. The son of Blackjack Mulligan, the first, well, not the first, but he was a second generation talent. The Blackjacks had made a stupid amount of money, as a team. And that was obviously something that was expected of Barry. And Barry started out in a lot of different ways, and I'm sure you have the whole timeline set up there, Sky. So I will pass this off to you as far as being the data and dates expert on this, because the first time I saw him was in the 80s with Crockett, but he had quite a career prior to that.
Right. So Barry Windham is trained by his father, Blackjack Mulligan, and former world champion Harley Race. Talk about two of the best.
Yeah.
Do you want to know his first opponent and his first match?
We'll hear it.
San Angelo, Texas, 1979, November 27th, against J.J. Dillon.
That's a pretty big match.
Yep. And again, is 19 years old. This is a guy who started wrestling fairly young, but he knew what he was doing. Again, just born into the business, trained properly. He spent a lot of time working in championship wrestling from Florida with Gordon Soley. And he worked a lot in that program, I think, for like 4 or 5 years before WWF came calling in 1984.
Yeah, and the thing is especially at that time in the 80s with Eddie Graham and Dusty learned a lot in Florida too, you know, especially in the 70s. That was the time that Dusty was down there. There was a lot to gain from Florida, you know, territories in Florida down there. They had some of the best wrestling minds in the business.
Yep.
We're coming down from Florida.
That's where he first tagged with his partner, Mike Rotunda, and both of them went to WWF as the U.S. Express, and they became the tag team champions, being the North-South Connection, Dick Murdoch and Adrian Adonis, for the WWF Tag Team Championships.
Yeah, what a wild tag team that is.
The first ever WrestleMania, they dropped the titles to the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov until they got them back in July later on that year. And then they lost the tag team titles the second time to the Dream Team, Greg Valentine and Brutus Beefcake.
One of these days, you and I should sit down and just look at WWE's tag division in the 80s. What a roller coaster that was between them and then the later in the late 80s and early 90s with Demolition and the Hearts and the Rockers and the Killer Bees and the...
Again, that's not even the most well-known tag teams. Like, did you know the North-South Connection was a real tag team of Dick Murdoch and Adrian Adonis?
I've never seen one of their matches. I know of it. I've never seen any of the matches, though.
Did you know that the U.S. Express of the Rotundas lost the tag team titles to the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov at the first WrestleMania?
You know, when you said that, it actually rang a bell because I've watched the first WrestleMania, so I'm pretty sure I've seen it. But it wasn't a match that I knew a ton of. And keeping in mind that most of the first WrestleMania is not that great, it had Dave Sammartino in it. So
okay, fair.
It wasn't that great a show, to be in all honesty. You know, had a hell of a main event, but it was a one match show. So I'm sure that I saw it and just didn't remember. And you know, Sheik and Volkov, that's a WWE tag team if ever there was one.
But I mean, that's a really good WWE tag team.
Oh yeah, both those guys quite good.
But then again, Windham leaves in 85. In 86, he works for Championship Wrestling for Florida again, much more experienced. And then 86 rolls around and he goes to Crockett.
Yeah, and this is where Barry really starts to develop. I mean, he had already at that point been pretty well respected for what he was able to do and his ability to work. And then he really starts to get to work with the guys that are doing really tremendous things in 86 and 87 in Crockett, and not just people like the Midnight and Bobby and Stan and I don't know if he actually did anything with Dennis Condrey at the time. Probably not, because that was already the Sweet Stan era.
I mean, the biggest feud for them at the time was Windham and Ron Garvin,
right,
versus Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane.
Right. Yeah, so that was the Sweet Stan era. But I mean, I'm sure he wrestled Dennis Condrey, but not ever in the 86 iteration or any of that context.
Right, because by that point, Condrey had retired and Stan Lane and Bobby Eaton were the Midnight Express.
Right. But
the Midnight were never able to beat Ron Garvin and Barry Windham. They were just too good.
Yeah, I'd like to take a look at Ron Garvin as well, because he's another fascinating guy. As far as the bleach blonde hair and the look and like the most awkward title run on earth. The weirdest champion that nobody remembers.
Yeah, but 1987, Barry Windham versus Ric Flair for the NWA World Title, 25-minute match. That is a really good match that eventually we have to watch at some point.
Yeah, and like I said before, we were going to watch it, but we also were like, yeah, but it's a Ric Flair match.
Yeah, and we've seen plenty of Ric Flair matches. But then, speaking of Ric Flair, 1984, the Four Horsemen.
Yep, you mean 87.
No, 88.
Or 88, the Horsemen. You said 84.
My bad. I went back in time.
But it's okay. We're all going back in time because that's where the wrestling was fun. And
but basically, he teamed up with Lex Luger in 88 and then betrayed him to join Ric Flair's stable, the Horsemen.
Yep, which at that time also had the iteration of Arn and Ole, right? That was, or at least that was coming up if that had not been present
passed.
at the time.
It was Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard.
Oh, that was the Tully and Arn era, yes. So, see, there were a lot of different iterations of the Horsemen. So it's hard to keep track of all the members.
But you can argue that the best version of the Horsemen was Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, Barry Windham, and J.J. Dillon.
Yes. Yeah, that iteration probably had the best talent, probably worked the best matches. We're going to consistently give you good cards, even if they weren't necessarily going to be the top draw. You know, because Windham, while as good as he was, and he deserved his world title run, he was never going to be drawing at the same level that somebody like Ric Flair would. And that's not a knock, but his title run kind of went more the JBL route than it did the Ric Flair route.
Right, but we have to remember that Barry was still pretty big. He won the NWA United States Heavyweight Championship, which was basically the U.S. title of the modern era in the mid-card. But look at this division that he's wrestling against. Brad Armstrong, Dusty Rhodes, Sting, Bam Bam Bigelow, before dropping it to Lex Luger in Chi-Town Rumble in 89.
Yeah. In a match that is surprisingly good because Barry Windham's running it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember seeing that match, and it's actually not bad. It's for a Luger match. It's got cohesion. He's able to lead Luger through his very high greenness at the time.
Yeah. But here's the fun thing. He goes to WWF as the Widowmaker.
Well, this is where things get weird for Barry, and really the peak of Barry, to me, was Crockett. I mean, that was really where he got the most out of the most amount of people. And even among the boys, he was considered one of the best workers of all of them, right next to Bobby. And you could see why, because he was putting out consistently good performances and good work every single time that you saw him. And every time I've seen Barry, every match I've seen that doesn't involve him being a part of the New Blackjacks, but from that era, every match he has is different, and all for different reasons are really good. So you could tell this is really the peak of what Barry Windham is able to do, and the max of what he's able to contribute to pro wrestling. But his career wasn't over.
No, it just hit a weird point because he goes to WWF as the Widowmaker. Counterfeiting led to him being fired.
Yeah, that was a weird thing with that. I forgot about the whole counterfeiting deal.
And then talk about his WCW run with the Horsemen again. This time, Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, Sid Vicious, Ole Anderson as a manager, and Barry.
Yeah, and that was more of a flash in the pan because before you knew it, Flair was gone. Ole's booking was running a lot of people off. It was just, Sid was going to end up leaving pretty soon for WWE and actually take Ric Flair's WrestleMania spot. Little did we know that was going to be what happened. But it was just, and Barry did his best, but it was a time when the company really couldn't maximize on him. You know, and again, we saw the match that we just saw, good match, but then look at what the finish was.
Now, yeah, that's true. But this is one of the weird points of WCW. 91, the WCW World Champion Ric Flair is fired by the company, and supposedly Flair was planning on dropping the title to Windham on a TV taping in Columbus, Georgia, but he got fired before it could happen. So Windham faces Lex Luger in a steel cage match at the Great American Bash in 91 in a double turn where Lex Luger became a heel.
Right.
And then it made Barry Windham very, very successful, like very popular babyface. But you want to know what they did with it?
Nothing.
They had Barry Windham team with Dustin Rhodes, my bad.
Yeah.
To feud with the Enforcers, Arn Anderson and Larry Zbyszko for no real reason.
Yeah, and Arn and Zbyszko were both very good wrestlers, but just did not gel as a tag team for whatever reason. And I like Zbyszko a lot. But this is also late stage Zbyszko's career as well. You know, not counting that 2005 match he had with Eric Young in TNA. You know,
right.
Zbyszko he was pretty much done at that point.
Right, and then it was just weird things that he was doing, like joining the Dangerous Alliance, wrestling against stunning Steve Austin, wrestling against guys like Brian Pillman in 92, 93.
Yeah, and he was still having decent matches with all of these people. It's like, not to say that his match quality was deteriorating, but his knees were. And especially towards, you know, the end of his WCW run, and then when he comes in 95, 96, part of the new Blackjacks, you could tell that the mobility was really starting to slow on his part. Right.
93, he beats the Great Muta for the NWA World Title at Super Brawl 3.
Yep. Yeah, I forgot he had another world title run even then.
That was his only world title run.
Oh, that's right. I forgot he never actually won it from Flair. He won it from Muta. But, you know, and that was good that he had it, and it's good that he got it, but 1993 WCW.
And again, the NWA World Title when it was at arguably its weakest.
Oh, this was the NWA World Title. I'm sorry, not the WCW
It's not the WCW
title.
World Title.
It's the NWA World Title. Right. Okay, that's why I got a little confused. So, yes.
And then he ended up dropping the belt to Flair. Again, the knee stuff.
Well, because his knees were starting to go, and then Flair was brought in to bail out what the rapidly sinking ship that was WCW before Bischoff completely turned it on its ear and got Turner's blank checkbook. But it was Flair, Windham, but then Windham was really starting, you know, he was starting to slow down. His knees were starting to be an issue, you know, and then, you know, like I said, then he comes in, you know, tries to help Bradshaw with the new Blackjacks, and Bradshaw looked good.
That was after he would return as the Stalker.
Oh, God. Yeah, and Vince gimmicks didn't help him either. And that might be the ultimate shame, too. It's like, if strictly WWE fans will not have a clue how good of a wrestler Barry Windham was, you know, in his prime, because all they'll recognize him as is all of these stupid horseshit gimmicks.
I mean, whether it's the Stalker, the new Blackjacks, or going back to WCW in 1998/1999 and being part of NWO Hollywood.
Or one of my favorites that he did was when he joined Kurt Hennig, and I forget who the other two were, in the West Texas Rednecks, which were a group of guys that were meant to basically give a middle finger to, I think it was Master P and Rey Mysterio, who were like trying to sell their albums, and then they did the Rap is Crap song. Have you heard that song, Sky?
It's cringe.
Oh, it's great. It's the greatest thing. I love rap, and it is the greatest thing I've ever. I love it. I love it
But
so
there's
much.
the thing is that they're supposed to be the heels, the masterpiece, baby faces, but it's WCW and the South.
That was I think that's why I like it so much. It was so hilariously silly that they ended up being the baby faces. They're like, no, yeah, rap is crap. Hell yeah, Super Bowl up top. and they end up.
A lot of after like 99 to 2010, basically, like he wrestles a little bit, but it's on the independent scene, and mostly it's just like those legacy matches that happened during that time.
Yeah, and then that was kind of just to capitalize on getting a pop that he could still get while still being limited in the ring, and and he kind of just rode off into the sunset and kind of faded away, which was nice.
Until 2012, when the Horsemen were inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, and it was good to see the original Horsemen, like again Flair, J.J. Dillon, Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, and Barry Windham. That is arguably one of the greatest heel stables of all time. Do not at me.
No, I won't. I won't, because and what's interesting about that is, yes, they were a stable, but they weren't necessarily all up in each other's business all the time either. They all had their own individual careers, but they were reined in by the idea that they were the best at what they did. And I think a big part of what modern stables problems are is everyone has to be all up in everybody else's business all the time.
Well, that's the thing, is that the Horsemen kind of influenced what the future stables of like the NWO or DX or the Elite want to be. Is that they want to be the cool, badass guys that everyone loves to hate and just loves in general, because the ladies love them, the guys hate them, but no one can capture what the Horsemen were.
No, and Barry was very much a part of that, right? Barry was very much a part of that, and is a crucial part of that I'm glad that we got to at least discuss to some length here today, because I do have a lot of respect for Barry Windham. I want to watch more Barry Windham, and because he is somebody, and then his legacy now, and just a little piece of not only just from him, but his sons, Bray and Bo, and what their contributions to wrestling are, and it remains to be seen what they're going to be at length long term. But we've gotten such a very peculiar career out of Bray Wyatt, and an even more peculiar one out of Bo Dallas. But it's still nice to see another wrestling family continue to have members of that family active.
Right, because it's hard, because there aren't that many wrestling families that are still active, because the Harts don't have anybody that's really active besides Natalya.
Yeah.
I mean, there's Teddy Hart, but we don't talk about Teddy Hart.
We don't talk about Teddy Hart, and we lost Tyson Kidd, who was going to be the next in line, and then the dungeon stopped, and there was the ceiling.
Right, but the Windhams, the Flairs are still around, but just barely. It's just Charlotte and who knows?
Well, Charlotte and Rick's still wrestling, so there's still two of them running wild, kiss stealing, wheeling, dealing, all that jazz.
And there was Tessa Blanchard, but the less I said about Tessa Blanchard, the better.
Tessa Blanchard does a good enough job of talking about Tessa Blanchard to make sure nobody has to.
But again, it's tough, because if Barry Windham was in a different era, he probably would be world champion more than he was, but just it's tough because of who he was working with.
Yeah, I mean, and it's one of those things where I feel like his legacy now, as far as what his contributions really are to what modern wrestling are, will probably never be stated enough. But at the same time, he's a guy who has earned the respect that he has gotten from the people at large, and has earned everything that he got in the business, and it's happy to see that he was able to take that and pass it down and continue things, and who knows what's going to happen with Bray and Bo long term, with them and what their future is, especially if Bo is Uncle Howdy. And there is some level. I mean, could you imagine what the depth of that story would be, with Barry now? And is Barry going to get involved somehow? Because there's been whispers about that basically from the start.
I think this heart attack has put those whispers to bed. And again, I don't even need to see Barry. I don't want to see Barry. I want Barry to have a good retirement and just a good life because of the struggles with health issues.
Well,
so
agreed.
Please, Barry, don't be like Ric Flair.
Well, I don't want him wrestling, for Christ's sakes. God damn. No, I mean, but seeing one appearance for would be nice. But, you know, at this point, I agree. You know, it's just like, stay alive. that's what matters.
Stay alive and honor the legacy and don't ruin it.
But
now, Sean.
Yes.
And get well.
Absolutely. And we are going to, a lot of people say that you were one of the best of your generation. And speaking of best ofs, folks, the next time you're going to see us is on December 31st for the Grapplies. And we have got a ton of categories that we got to sort through. And we want to know what your nominations are and who you believe deserve these in the comments below. You know, of course, we've got a number of categories, Sky, going into this, and we may add some, subtract some, but the ones from last year, we had the best and worst wrestler in the male category, female category, best match, best promo, worst promo, best tag team, worst tag team, best pay-per-view, worst pay-per-view, best stable, worst stable, best gimmick, worst gimmick, which we may or may not keep, the best botch and the worst botch, and the best feud and the worst feud.
Yep, and we're going to determine what those are going to be. But, Sean, do you want to know what's never a dud?
I have a feeling I know what you're going to say.
It's your music.
Well, I appreciate that. I wish it were true. But the fact is, if you want some excitement, if you want some sort of music for any sort of occasion you could possibly think of, there is only one destination you need to look at, and that is the two industry-busting artists taking the world by storm, one track at a time. We have got two brand new albums that have just come out in the past couple of months. Just a Bit More, the album from White Knux, and of course Mixed Bag 2 from Abizzle, both featuring Abizzle and White Knux. Both of us are on both of them. And we also have the entire discography of over 128 monetizable songs, and then a slew of ones on SoundCloud on top of that. We are talking hundreds of songs, hours upon hours, days worth of content for you. It is all just a click away. The link is in the description. Look for White Knux, spelled WHITE space KNUX, or Abizzle, spelled ABIZZLE, on SoundCloud, Apple Music, Spotify, anywhere you want it. That's the way you need it. Lawsuit is pending for us, but for you, come join the entertainment revolution with AB Productions CT.
And keep the music going because it's going to be hot in 2023.
That's right. And there's going to be a lot coming in 2023, both from the Court-Martail podcast and from Abizzle and White Knux. But before we do that, we got to look back at 2022, and we're going to do that at the Grapplies. So, folks, it is now time to take our first commercial break. Sky, great episode as always, and a great regular episode to end the year on.
Yep. Now let me get my hangover medication because goddamn this eggnog.
That's right. That eggnog was pretty fierce, and we're going to have to see how we could shake off those eggs and bring about 2023 and turn them into beautiful little chicks. But until then, my puns are going nowhere. We're tanking. But that is the best part.
Just like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense.
Well, let's see if it's... But let's see if that... Hopefully that ship will not sink the way that Jim Hurts did. But while this ship is sinking, I'm going to start bailing out water, and we'll be right back.